Savvy Central Radio, drawing out the best from our guests, with host Christina Nitchman.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Savvy Central Radio. This is your host, Christina Nitchman. Each week on Savvy, we host successful individuals and business owners, inviting them to share their dreams, stories, wisdom, and lessons learned in their field of business. Our guest today is Diane DeResta, media trainer, speech coach, and certified speech pathologist, who works with executives in Fortune 500 companies, celebrities, and sports figures to get them communicating with clarity and precision. She trains business people to communicate with greater impact in the marketplace and coach leaders to project their power to influence in order to achieve the results they want. She is also the best-selling author of several books, including her new book, Give Fear the Finger, How to Knock Out Fear in Public Speaking. To find out more about Diane and her practice, go to DiResta.com. That's DIRESTA.com. Hi, Diane. Welcome to Savvy Central Radio. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me, Christina.
Well, I'm excited to have you talk about a very important topic for a lot of small businesses, and that is speaking with confidence. And it's very important when you're a small business owner, getting out there, not only maybe speaking before a live audience, but just getting out there and telling people about what you're about, what your business is all about. And you've had quite a journey that's led you to becoming a media trainer, a speech coach, and a certified speech pathologist. How did this all come about for you?
Well, it's interesting. When I was thinking back, I started correcting people's speech at a very early age, and I would be complimented on not having a Brooklyn accent, since that's where I lived. So when I went to college, I was looking for a major. I took a speech course, learned about speech pathology, and it seemed like a fit, and it was. So for the first 8 years, I worked in the New York City public schools. And what happened there is I saw no career path and I wasn't challenged any longer. So I made a career change to a company called Executive Technique, which was stand-up presentations. I got that job through the New York Times. I had to audition for it, but it was a real journey and struggle to make that transition from speech pathology to business trainer. After about a year and a half, I had become their senior associate, and I went to Salomon Brothers, where I was doing management training. And what happened from there is the market crashed and I was out of a job. And from there, I got another job about a month later, very fortunate. And the reason is because I had good relationships and networked. And I was the assistant vice president of the institutional sales and trading training program. What that meant is I would go out on college campuses and recruit MBAs for fixed income and equity, and then we would put the training program together. What I realized is that I liked the work, I liked the fast pace, I liked the money, but I didn't like the cutthroat culture of Wall Street. So I left. And I had been from a helping profession. It wasn't a fit culturally. And having had some outplacement experience training people who are transitioning, I soon learned that most people are in the wrong jobs. And it's not because of a skill set, but because of a culture mismatch. So I realized that values were important. So I left in search of a full-time training manager position. While I was looking, I didn't have a job, so I started freelancing. How did I do that? I remembered the salesperson who worked at a training company. Again, always about relationships and networking. I called him up and said, "Can you get me in there?" So I got an interview and I started freelancing 3 days a week. I was making $300 a day, so I was grossing $900 a month. So that was my beginning. The break was that a few months later, a recruiter I had known at Salomon Brothers said, "I know someone who's looking for a training manager for 6 months. Can you do it?" So I went for the interview, got the job, and I said, "I'll take it on one condition. I want those 3 days a month free so I can do my other training." We did it. My 6 months were up. And what happened from there is my boss then started to hire me as a independent contractor. So that became my first account. And then he left a few years later to go to another company, and he brought me into that company. And that was an account for about 10 years. But what happened in the interim, I realized that this really suited my personality. So my husband said, well, why don't you start your own business? Go out on your own. And I said, well, I don't have enough experience. And he said, you have enough experience. And I said, well, I don't think I know enough. And he said, you know enough. But I didn't have the confidence. So I kept looking for a full-time training manager position. What happened is 2 years later, I was offered a position. And I'll never forget the day. My husband heard me on the phone talking to the prospective manager, and he said, you don't want that job. I said, what do you mean? He said, you don't sound excited. He's going to offer you more money. And I said, no, he's not. I already know what the salary is. Well, a few days later, I got a call, and he made me an offer, and he offered me more money. And I turned it down. You know, when you have that feeling in your gut, you just don't feel excited. It doesn't feel right. And so I turned it down, even though I didn't feel I had the confidence or the know-how to start this business. And that was the beginning of starting this business. So I just did it, even though I didn't know what I was doing at the time. And little by little, I developed contacts. But the lesson here is that even when you don't know, and even when you don't have confidence, follow your passion, follow what your gut is telling you, and little by little, you'll be able to get there.
Yeah, that is such a great point. And I think everyone can relate out there when you first start your business, even if you've done quite a bit of research. Because I did some business research and thought I had my ducks in order. I really knew my expertise very well, which was financial consulting when I started out. But I didn't really think that I had to know sales and PR. I thought, well, I'll hire those folks. But there's a certain aspect to each part of your business that you have to be aware of, even if you do hire outside help to work on it. And we spoke before the interview a little bit about women's confidence and how it plays a role in them asking for what they're worth and standing in their power. Why do you think this is, that it's so hard for women to really ask for what they're worth and really stand in their power often?
Well, I've given this a lot of thought, Christina, and I'm certainly in that same bucket, so to speak. I've had struggles with confidence. I had a father who was a lieutenant colonel in the Army who believed that children should be seen and not heard. So my self-expression was not nurtured or valued in a sense. So it's no wonder that confidence can be a struggle. When I think about women in general, there are a few things that come to mind. We know from the research and we know from experience that men have more confidence generally. Why is that? Well, I think one of the reasons is biological. We have different brains and they have more testosterone. So there's that surge of that courage or risk-taking hormone that is more prevalent in a greater amount than we have. But the other side of it is women are relatively new to the workplace in terms of, let's say, the last 30 years. When I was growing up, the career paths were teacher, nurse, or admin, secretary. There weren't a whole lot of management opportunities. And so this is a male model. The corporations have been built on the military model of hierarchy and command and control. Yes, that's changing, but it's still a male environment. I think that's one of the issues that women have. It's not natural to our nature, and they don't get the support. This is the challenge that I hear all the time. And I want to share some statistics with you. This was a study by Bain and Company. They said that most women don't feel supported by their supervisors, and that when they start a job, starting women believe, or at least 43% of them want to reach top management. 27% say they have the confidence to do so. Their confidence plummets to 13% after 2 years on the job. And then after they've gone past that hurdle, after the 2-year mark, 29% of them feel confident. Now, if you contrast that with men, the males starting out, 28% are confident that they can get to a top position. 2 years later, it drops to about 25%. But after a number of years, 55% feel they have the confidence to reach a senior job. And so that's really critical. That's a difference. The other thing that was interesting is there's research by Leaders Edge, and the senior executive female leaders who participated in the survey said that 35% of the challenge is confidence. Of all the issues, 35% is confidence as the biggest challenge. So we have to think about how do we support our women in organizations. And here's what's interesting to me. I don't believe that women are less competent. Because what they're doing, they're finding when they leave corporations or traditional jobs, it's not to go home and be a homemaker, it's to start a business. And women-owned businesses are the fastest growing segment. So when they are left to their own devices, they do really well. I think we need to get more sponsorship for women in organizations to support them.
Wow, you hit on so many targets here, and you really bring to mind for me what it was like for me working in the corporate arena. And I think a lot of other women can relate. Being in a very male-oriented corporate arena, I often found myself competing as a male, acting very non-feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And not getting support. I mean, I remember from early on starting at one of the top organizations I worked at saying I wanted to work into a supervisory management role. And my boss was like, well, that's nice. You should keep that on hand for the future. But after a couple of years, men working right along beside me, not doing better work than I was were getting promoted. And so it was very disheartening. But here's the thing that I found very interesting, Diane, is that a lot of times within my experience in corporate, a lot of women around me would keep other women down, which I think is pretty sad.
Yes, and I love Madeleine Albricht's statement that there's a special place in hell for women who won't help other women. And this is my passion. I love working with women, and I help and support as many women as I can, both young girls. I created a confidence class in my community a few years ago for middle school girls, to working with women leaders. So my sweet spot are women leaders and C-level executives in corporations. Where I focus is empowering through the spoken word. And it's helping them craft and deliver compelling presentations that get results. And the outcome is they advance their careers. They have more gravitas and executive presence. They're a lot more confident.
Mm-hmm. So I would gather from what you're saying here that really it all starts from building your business to asking for what you're worth, standing in your power, all starts with being able to present yourself through the spoken word with confidence.
Yes, and that's why I wrote a book in 1998 called Knockout Presentations, which I revised in 2009 and is still selling, and especially in colleges. They're using it in some colleges as a textbook. And then I recently created an ebook called Give Fear the Finger, How to Knock Out Fear of Public Speaking. And I hear you chuckling. People love the title, especially if they're from the New York region. But let me tell you something. There's a disclaimer here. I have never given the finger to anybody in my life, and that's not the meaning of the title. I discovered that there is an acupressure point on one of the fingers, and when you press on that, it short circuits anxiety. So it's literally, you're giving fear the finger, but it's a double entendre. When you look at that, when you read the ebook, there is a link that will take you to a video that will show you how to do that.
Wow. And I haven't gotten to read your whole book. I looked through it, and what I loved is that there's so much content, and with the written content, you actually add videos so people can see you in action, speaking the techniques, showing them how to use them in presentations when they're practicing and such, including this one, which I'm looking forward to checking out myself on YouTube.
Well, thank you.
Yay. So I'm glad now that women are able to build their confidence, gain their self-worth through your books and your services, I'm hoping, how do they even begin to figure out what the sweet spot is for charging for their services and going through that whole process?
Well, we both know that women don't charge what they should. In fact, even though they say we make 77 cents on the dollar and that men and women in the same job will find that men get paid a little bit more, one of the pushbacks, and I agree with it, from recruiters is, well, the women don't ask for those numbers. And they're absolutely right. I don't think women do. Women are weak negotiators by contrast to men. And this was proved out by research from the Leader's Edge that surveyed senior executive women, and they found three things they all had in common. One was that they had weak networks, both internally and externally. They were not big risk takers, and they were weak negotiators. So women need to learn to negotiate. But how do you realize what you're worth? You first have to know the market. You can't throw a number out there. And there is a market range for any kind of job, salary, or service. And you can find that out. You can use recruiters, you can do online searches, you can call up competitors and find out what the going rate is, and then what is the range. And then once you have that information, it's much easier, because let's say you organize closets. Well, it's not likely that you're going to charge $1,000 an hour, because the market will not bear that unless you're a Tony Robbins or a real high-level celebrity. So you have to know the market value. But then what is the value of your worth? And a lot of times we get stuck in time. Well, it's this an hour. But if you start to think of, well, what's the value or outcome of working with me? You'll feel a lot more confident in charging what you're worth. For example, the outcome of working with me is that people advance their careers. I've helped assistant directors become directors. I've helped AVPs become vice presidents. I've helped SVPs become executive vice presidents. So what is the value of that? Think about what's the outcome and what's that worth monetarily to those people, and that will help you set your fees.
Those are fabulous, fabulous points. And this recalls for me, one of my old bosses did me such a service. He said several years ago when I was applying for a job, he said to me, I noticed, and he said to me just what you were saying, that women often come into my office for a job when they're applying, and we lay it out for them. We tell them, here's the salary, and they're like, okay. And they just take the first number we put down on the table. Whereas a man, we have them come to the same interview, and they're always like, okay, so that's the bottom line. They're looking at this number that we put on the table as the bottom line, and they go from there. But he said to me, sometimes a company might be in a position where they can't offer you more, but there's always something to negotiate.
Exactly.
And he said to me, if they can't negotiate with money, you can work with time, vacation, benefits, stuff like that. And that helped me out tremendously. The very next job I applied for, they were interested in me and they couldn't give me more money. So I worked out a month and a half worth of vacation time.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, as they say, time is money. And you know what? Time is more valuable than money because it's finite. We all have the same 24 hours. So we need to think differently and not accept the first offer. So think of negotiating for a job as buying a car. You're not going to pay sticker price. So what can you do for me? What can we negotiate here?
Great. And how important is it to build confidence to succeed in your business? I'm guessing pretty important.
It's the name of the game. It's extremely important. And now what's exciting to me is there's actually research that proves it out. And what they've discovered is confidence trumps competence. So what we believed but couldn't prove, we can now prove it. And I say this now in workshops and speeches to women. The other day when I was talking to a group of women, I had them repeat. I said, repeat after me. Confidence trumps competence. What does that mean? If you have two people who are equally qualified, the more confident person is going to get it. And I would take a step further and say, the person who has a little bit more of a skill level and experience level, but is less confident, will probably not get the job. So confidence is everything.
And I'm guessing, not by their conscious knowledge of it, that some women are probably, with negative messaging in their head and negative language they're using, affect their success on a daily basis in business and in the corporate arena.
Absolutely. And there's a look to confidence, there's a sound to confidence, and there's a language to confidence. And when I work with people, either one-on-one or into large groups, we make sure that we align these three, because people who are confident are in alignment, and that's part of executive presence. The language that I hear that undermines women more often than men is what I call wimpy words. This is just a suggestion. Well, it's sort of kind of like, well, maybe if you don't mind, we could perhaps meet, and I feel this might, and what have you just said? I don't believe in myself. So nobody is going to follow your lead. We need to learn to speak with conviction. We need to put a stake in the ground. We need to bring our voice down at the end of a sentence instead of the up talking. So it sounds like I'm asking a question. I've seen women not advance their careers because they were up talking and because of wimpy words. And I remember one woman in particular who looked like dressed for success, but when she opened her mouth, she wasn't savvy or confident. And just that, by working with her language and her tone, we were able to change the perception of her by senior management, and she got promoted.
Wow. So up talking would be you're talking too much and not letting the other people talk?
No, up talking is a rising inflection. It's like Valley Girl talk.
Oh,
And every time you say a sentence, you're sounding like you're asking. This doesn't sound very confident.
yeah, absolutely.
In fact, if you Google the word uptalk, I will come up on the top 10. I've done a video on it, and I've done articles, and I've been interviewed on it. It's reaching epidemic proportions. It does not serve us in the workplace, and this is especially deadly for women because we have a glass ceiling.
Yeah. And interestingly, you mentioned this uptalk because I've seen people come or heard people come to me and say, hey, I'm a professional speaker. I'd like to come on your show. I'd like to do advertising, whatever. And I've noticed when we get to talking to each other that they're doing just what you're saying. They'll end with a lot of you knows or aha and a lot of questions at the end of each sentence, question mark. And I'm thinking, I don't really believe that you believe in yourself, and I'm having trouble believing in you.
Well, that's the perception. And here's the good news. Simply by changing the behavior, you can change the perception. It takes a while for the mind to follow. So confidence doesn't happen overnight, but you can learn power positions, you can learn languaging, you can learn to bring your tone down and speak with conviction, and people will start perceiving you differently. What happens then, over time, you start to build that confidence. Confidence is on two levels. It's mindset and skill set, and I work on both levels when I work with people.
Wow. And do women also within a speaking arena also sabotage their communication with the way they handle their body language on stage as well?
Yes, and let me make this disclaimer. I'm not saying that men don't have sabotaging behaviors, because when it comes to public speaking, they're equally nervous. But there are some female behaviors that are unique to women, and one of them is the ankle cross. I've seen women stand in front of a group and they cross their ankles. And when you stand with your ankles crossed, it says that you're either nervous or you have to go to the bathroom. Either one is not a very powerful stance. So I show people how to stand in their power. Another typical female gesture is excessive head nodding. And although men occasionally nod their heads, the challenge here is if it's excessive, it looks submissive, and then men think you're agreeing with them. So women need to nod their heads less, and men need to check in and say, does that mean you agree with me?
I love that. And what it recalls for me, Diane, is many years ago, I did my very first presentation in front of a live audience, and it was videotaped. And I was horrified upon watching it and seeing that during the whole video, I kept lifting up my shirt and tucking in my dress shirt, then putting down my jacket and doing it 5 times during the whole speech. And I was like, what am I doing with my pants?
Well, you know what that is? It's nervous energy, and it needs expression. So that's how you were expressing it. But we show you different ways that you can channel it that's more effective. But yes, that's why videotaping is so powerful. And I use it in almost every session, whether it's one-on-one or a group, because the camera doesn't lie. It's your greatest coach.
Absolutely. And I remember in one of your videos you mentioned, I thought this was very interesting, that while making a point, you can move to different sections of the room, like start at one side, make a point, second point, move to the middle, and then third point, move to the other side of the stage. And each time kind of assessing or making that stance with your body is also indicating the point you're making, which I thought was very interesting.
Exactly. And I often start my presentations and speeches with this question. When you walk into a room, do you own the room, or does the room own you? The minute you walk into a room, you've already signaled a message. And how you manage that is key. And so you are working the room when you're moving to different parts of the stage or platform. But even when you're sitting in a meeting at a table, there are certain stances and postures that work very well.
And I'm guessing often I hear from people, I don't like to look at the audience. It freaks me out to see their faces. But I would say that it's probably a good idea to actually make eye contact with your audience.
Absolutely. You want to have a one-on-one experience, even if there are hundreds of people in the room, and I show people how to do that. It's all about creating presence on the platform. You want to have a communication and an exchange of energy. And again, these are all skills that people can learn, and that's the good news. Good news is that gifted speakers are born but effective speakers are made.
I love it. And how can people become an effective speaker with you, Diane? How can they work with you?
Well, they can contact me at my website, DeResta.com. That's D as in David I, R-E, S as in Sam, T as in Thomas A.com. They can go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Diane DeResta. There are about 109 videos there. Or you can give me a call at 212-481-8484, extension 312.
Awesome. And what is the grand vision for your business in the coming months?
I would like to create some online classes and do more virtual work so that I can reach a bigger audience, and so that people who can't work with me individually or in a group could afford me in a different realm. And of course, there's always my books. There are always my books, Knockout Presentations and Give Fear the Finger. It's a great starting point.
I'd say so, absolutely. Well, before we head on out here, Diane, is there any last parting words you'd like to leave with our audience?
Yes. Confidence trumps competence. You can no longer avoid public speaking because it is career suicide. Speaking is the new competitive advantage, and it levels the playing field. Get out there and start speaking. If you're nervous, get help. Get a coach, take a class, read a book, but go out there and start speaking.
Absolutely. And Diane, they don't even need to be in front of an audience. Every day you get out of your house and you start speaking to neighbors and to people you know about yourself and your business, you are promoting yourself every day, all day.
Every day, all day. In fact, a voicemail is public speaking. So we're all public speakers.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Diane, for coming to Savvy Central Radio and sharing your wisdom and gifts.
Thank you, Christina. It's been fun.
Today, for our Savvy listeners, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you an opportunity to check out their awesome services. Their audiobooks are great for the entrepreneur, small business owner on the run. Get your free audiobook today at www.audibletrial.com/Savvy Central Radio. There are some exciting changes coming this 2015 for Savvy. We'll start videocasting some of our interviews. Also, stay tuned for a new book presently being worked on by my co-author and I, Karen Rowe. We'll talk about how to bridge the gap from worker bee to business owner, and the lessons we've learned on our journey to entrepreneurship. In addition, this spring we'll start live interview opportunities in Manhattan, which will later be aired on iHeartRadio, a new mix to business networking and interviews. For those interested in participating as a paid sponsor or interviewee, contact us at 718-713-2289 or savvycentralradio@gmail.com.